Saturday morning at the Reynolds house began as usual. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, reflecting on the clean countertop. From the small radio on the windowsill came the tune of an old Journey hit, and Tom hummed, slightly out of tune, "Don't Stop Believin'." He stood in the laundry room, sorting clothes from the dryer. T-shirts, towels, a pair of Clara's jeans, everything is familiar, routine. It was his ritual. Every Saturday he would do the laundry himself, giving Clara an extra hour of sleep. She always joked that this was his way of earning a Husband of the Year medal. Tom pulled out another load of laundry and threw it into the basket. Something shiny flashed among the fabric and fell to the floor with a quiet rustle. He bent down, expecting to find a coin or a button. Instead, his fingers found a crumpled condom wrapper. Metal foil, tattered but clearly recognizable, with a bright inscription. Tom froze, still squatting. His humming stopped mid-sentence. "What the?" he muttered, turning the wrapper in his hands. His brain refused to process information. He and Clara did not use condoms. Never. Not since he had a vasectomy 10 years ago, after they decided Emma and Jake were all they wanted. The doctor then said, "The probability of conception is less than 1%. And they believed. Why do they need condoms? Tom felt the blood rush to his temples. His heart began to pound as if he had run a mile. He stood up, still clutching the wrapper, and stared at the dryer as if it might provide the answer. The first thought was absurd, but inevitable. Clara. He immediately drove her away. No, that's impossible. Clara is not like that. They've been married for 20 years and have been through everything from sleepless nights with babies to financial crises. She wouldn't. Or would she? He tucked the wrapper into his jeans pocket, as if hiding evidence from himself. My hands were shaking slightly. "Calm down, Tom," he told himself, taking a deep breath. Maybe this is some kind of mistake. Maybe it was old underwear that had been lying somewhere for a long time. But he knew that this was nonsense. They did laundry regularly, and the dryer was clean. This wrapper got here recently. Tom returned to sorting the laundry, but his movements became mechanical. Thoughts were spinning like a squirrel in a wheel. He remembered how Clara had been late at work a couple of times recently. Consultation with students, she said. He didn't ask questions. Clara loved her job, and he trusted her. But now these delays seemed suspicious. Or is he screwing himself over? The bedroom door creaked, and Clara's footsteps were heard. She walked into the kitchen, yawning, her brown hair pulled back into a messy bun. She was wearing Tom's old t-shirt and pajama pants. "Good morning, laundry hero," she said with a smile, pouring coffee from the coffee maker. "Have you earned your medal yet?" Tom forced himself to smile, but it came out forced. He turned his back to her, folding the towel so she couldn't see his face. "Yeah, almost," he answered, trying to sound normal, but his voice was a little higher than necessary. Clara put the mug on the table and looked at him. "Are you okay?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "You look like the coffee hasn't taken effect yet." "It's okay," Tom said too quickly. He tossed the towel into the basket and turned toward her, leaning against the counter. It's like this morning, you know." Clara frowned, but did not insist. She sat down at the table, scrolling through something on her phone. Tom looked at her, trying to find something unusual in her face. But it was the same Clara with slight wrinkles around her eyes that appeared when she laughed, with the habit of pursing her lips when she read. His Clara, and yet the wrapper burned my pocket like a hot coal. "Would you like some pancakes?" she asked without looking up from the phone. "I can make it with blueberries." "No, I'll eat something later," Tom answered. He couldn't think about food. His stomach churned at the thought of the conversation he knew was inevitable. But how to start? Just take out the wrapper and say, "Hey, what is this?" It sounded crazy. What if she gets offended? Or worse, what if she confesses to something? Tom wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans. He had to figure it out. But not now. Not like that. He needs time to collect his thoughts. He took the laundry basket and headed into the living room. "I'll go sort this out," he said over his shoulder. Clara looked after him, her eyebrows raised slightly. She knew Tom too well to believe his "everything is fine." But she decided to give him space. Sometimes he needed time to talk. She took a sip of coffee and returned to the phone, unaware that their morning was the last calm morning for a long time. Tom sat down on the sofa, placing the basket next to him. He pulled the wrapper out of his pocket and stared at it. Damn packaging that shouldn't be here. He squeezed it in his fist, feeling the foil crumple. His mind raced between logic and paranoia. He knew he had to talk to Clara. But what if the truth is worse than he can bear? Clara sat at the kitchen table, holding a mug of coffee with both hands. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the smell of detergent wafting from the laundry room. The radio was still playing, but now the melody sounded muffled, like a background to her thoughts. She scrolled through the news on her phone, but her gaze kept returning to Tom. He stood at the stove, fiddling with a toaster, but something was wrong. His shoulders were tense, his movements were abrupt, and his usual morning jokes about her love of coffee or his inability to spread butter evenly were absent. Tom was silent, and this silence seemed heavy, almost tangible. "Tom, are you sure you're okay?" Clara asked, putting the phone down. Her voice was soft, but there was a sense of wariness in it. She knew him too well. 20 years of marriage had taught her to notice when he became withdrawn. Tom froze, holding the toast in his hand. He didn't turn around, just nodded slightly. "Yes, okay," he said, but his voice was strained, as if he was holding back something. He put the toast on the plate and began to spread the butter, but he did it with such force that the knife scraped the bread. Clara frowned. She put the mug down and crossed her arms over her chest. "It doesn't seem normal," she said, her tone becoming a little harsher. "You're silent, as if I've done something." "What's happening?" Tom finally turned around. His face was paler than usual, his lips pressed into a thin line. He looked at her for a second, then looked away as if he couldn't bear her eyes. Clara felt her stomach tighten. It wasn't just a bad day. Something was seriously wrong. "Nothing, Clar," he said, but his voice trembled. He placed the plate of toast on the table with a loud thud. "It's just this morning." "Is this morning?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Tom, you're acting like I stole your favorite sweater and sold it on eBay. Tell me what happened." Tom clenched his fists as he stood at the table. His fingers fiddled with the hem of his t-shirt, and in his jeans pocket there was a wrapper that burned him like a hot coin. He didn't want this conversation. Not now. Not like that. But her gaze direct, demanding an answer, left no choice. He knew that if he remained silent, she would dig until she got to the bottom. And yet the words stuck in my throat. How do I say this? How do you ask your wife of 2 decades if she is cheating on him? It was crazy. But the wrapper was real. He reached into his pocket, felt the crumpled foil, and pulled it out. His fingers trembled as he placed the wrapper on the table between them. The metal packaging looked incongruous on their wooden table, next to her mug and his toast. "Explain," he said. His voice was cold, almost alien. He didn't recognize him himself. Clara stared at the wrapper. Her eyes widened and her eyebrows shot up. She opened her mouth, but didn't make a sound. The second of silence stretched out like an eternity. Tom looked at her, trying to grasp at least something: guilt, embarrassment, justification. But her face expressed only shock. "What is this?" She finally squeezed out. Her voice was quiet, but there was confusion in it. She looked up at Tom. "Where does this come from?" "You tell me," he answered, crossing his arms. His heart was beating so hard that he could feel the pulse in his ears. "I found this in the dryer. This morning." Clara blinked, still looking at the wrapper. She reached out to it, but stopped, as if she was afraid to touch it. "Tom, this is not ours," she said, her voice becoming firmer. "You know we don't use this. Already 10 years. "I know," he said, his tone sharper. "That's why I'm asking. Where did this come from, Clara?" She leaned back in her chair, her face pale. Her fingers nervously tapped the mug. She looked at him, and a mixture of resentment and bewilderment flashed in her eyes. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Do you think this is mine? Do you really think that I—" What? Tom clenched his jaw. He didn't want to say it, but the words came out on their own. I don't know what to think, Clar. I found this thing in our dryer. We don't use condoms. So tell me, what is it? Somebody's joke? Or what? Clara stood up abruptly, her chair creaking on the floor. She put her hands on her hips, her cheeks flushed. You're kidding, right? She said, her voice trembling with anger. Are you really standing here accusing me of what? In treason? After 20 years? I'm not accusing, Tom said, but his tone said otherwise. He stood up too, feeling the blood rushing to his face. I'm just asking. Because it's not mine, Clara. And if not yours, then whose? I don't know, she almost shouted, spreading her arms. Maybe it's Emma or Jake. They arrived last week. Tom shook his head, his lips pursed. Our children? Seriously. Emma lives in a dorm, and Jake lives in another state altogether. And they don't wash their clothes here, Clara. You know that. Clara fell silent, her breathing heavy. She turned away, looking out the window where a neighbor was watering the lawn. Her fingers gripped the edge of the tabletop. It's not mine, Tom, she said quietly but firmly. I don't know how it got in the dryer. But I don't. I would never. She didn't finish, her voice broke. Tom felt a pang of guilt, but doubts did not go away. He wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted it. But that damn wrapper lay on the table like evidence he couldn't ignore. Then explain, he said, trying to speak more calmly, because I'm trying to understand, and nothing adds up. Clara turned to him, her eyes shining with tears, but she held on. I don't know, Tom, she said, her voice full of pain. But you stand here and look at me as if I'm a stranger. It hurts. Tom opened his mouth to answer, but the words stuck. He saw her pain, but his own did not let go. He felt betrayed, although he wasn't sure by whom or what. He looked away, staring at the wrapper. I need to think, he said finally, his voice hoarse. He took a plate of toast, although he didn't want to eat, and headed towards the living room. Think, Clara asked, her voice becoming louder. Tom, you can't just leave this and go. We must talk. Not now, Clar, he said without turning around. Just, not now. She looked after him, her hands dropped limply. The kitchen, which had recently been warm and cozy, now seemed cold. The wrapper was left on the table, small but destructive. Clara wiped away a tear and sat down, feeling like something in their marriage was cracked, and she didn't know how to fix it. Tom collapsed on the sofa in the living room, the plate of toast still in his hands. He looked at the ceiling, trying to calm his breathing. He didn't want to believe that Clara would betray him. But the wrapper was real, and until he finds the answer, it will stand between them like a wall. The kitchen, recently filled with the aroma of coffee and the morning routine, now seemed cramped, as if the air was thick with tension. The condom wrapper lay on the table between Tom and Clara, small, shiny, but destructive. Clara stood with her hands on her hips, her cheeks flushed with anger and resentment. Tom, sitting on a chair, looked at her, his fingers nervously squeezing the edge of the tabletop. Their voices, just loud, died down, but the silence was even worse. It was oppressive, like the silence before a storm. Clara was the first to break the silence. Her voice trembled, but she tried to control herself. Tom, do you really think that I could? She faltered, unable to say the word treason. After everything we've had, after 20 years? Tom looked away, his jaw tense. He didn't want to say it, but the thoughts that had been spinning in his head since the discovery came out. I don't know what to think, Clara, he said, his voice low, but there was pain in it. I found this thing in our dryer. We don't use condoms. Never. And you want me to just shrug and forget. Clara shook her head, her eyes shining with tears she was fighting to hold back. No, I want you to believe me, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know where it came from, but it's not mine, and not yours, so why are you looking at me like it's my fault? Tom stood up, his chair creaking on the floor. He began to walk around the kitchen, running his hand through his hair. His heart was pounding, and images flashed through his head that he did not want to see. Clara with someone else, her smile, not intended for him. He hated himself for having these thoughts, but he couldn't stop them. Because it doesn't just appear, Clara, he said, his voice getting louder. This is not a candy wrapper, not a damn coin. This, he pointed to the wrapper, unable to find words. And lately, you've been late at work. These are your consultations. Every night this week you've been late. Clara froze, her eyes widening in amazement. She opened her mouth, but for several seconds she could not utter a word. When she spoke, her voice was full of anger. Are you serious? She almost shouted. Are you accusing me of cheating because I work? Tom, I'm a school psychologist. It's the end of the semester, kids are stressed, parents are panicking. I'm staying late to help them, you know it. I know, Tom said, but his tone was harsh. But you never tell me what's going on there. Just consultations, that's all. Should I just nod and not ask questions? Clara stepped towards him, her hands clenched into fists. Do you want details? Fine. On Monday, I spoke for 2 hours with a mother whose son does not want to go to school because he is being bullied. On Tuesday, I helped a high school student who is afraid she won't get into college. Yesterday, I sat with a teacher who is on the verge of burnout. It's my job, Tom, and you never asked because you didn't seem to care. Tom stopped, his face turning red. Her words hurt him, but he was not ready to back down. The wrapper lay on the table as evidence he couldn't ignore. I care, he said, his voice becoming quieter, but there was anger in it. But I'm not blind, Clara. You come home tired, you can barely talk, and now this. He nodded at the wrapper. What should I think? Clara laughed, but it was a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. You must think that I'm your wife, Tom, that I love you, that I don't run around corners with some. Lovers, God, can you even hear what it sounds like? She turned away, her shoulders shaking. Tom looked at her, feeling his anger mixed with guilt. He didn't want to hurt her. He loved her. But the doubts he tried to suppress burst out, and he didn't know how to stop them. And you? Clara suddenly said, turning to him. Her eyes narrowed, a spark flashed in them. You're not a saint yourself, Tom. What's all this secrecy with your phone? Every time I'm around, you turn it upside down, or you put it in your pocket. Do you think I don't notice? Tom blinked, her words taking him by surprise. My phone? He asked, his voice full of bewilderment. Clara, it's just a habit. I'm not hiding anything. Is it true? She said, crossing her arms. Then why do you twitch so much when I take your phone to check the time? Or when a notification arrives, do you immediately check it, as if I shouldn't see it? Tom opened his mouth, but closed it, unable to find words. He really wasn't hiding anything. Well, maybe a couple of stupid messages from colleagues in a group chat where they joked about the boss. But that wasn't what she was thinking. Or was she just trying to change the arrows? This is funny, he said finally, shaking his head. You know that I have no secrets, but this thing. He pointed to the wrapper again. This doesn't explain itself. Clara stared at him, her face a mixture of pain and disappointment. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but her voice was still shaking. I don't know where it comes from, Tom, she said, but I didn't cheat on you. And if you don't believe me, if you really think that I could, then I don't know what to even talk about. She turned and headed for the door, grabbing her jacket from the rack. Tom followed her. Where are you going? He asked, his voice filled with worry. I need to clear my head, she said without turning around. Because I can't sit here now and listen to you accuse me of something I didn't do. Clara, wait, he said, but she had already opened the door. She turned around for a second, her eyes filled with tears. I thought you trusted me, Tom, she said quietly. Apparently, I was mistaken. The door slammed and Clara left. Tom remained standing in the middle of the kitchen, his breathing heavy. He looked at the wrapper still on the table and felt his world crumble. He didn't want to believe that Clara would betray him. But if not her, then who? And why couldn't he just believe her? He slowly sat down on the chair, resting his head in his hands. Moments of their lives surfaced in his memory. How they laughed at stupid jokes, how they held hands when Emma was born, how Clara cried on his shoulder when her father died. This was his Clara, but the wrapper lay in front of him, and he did not know how to reconcile it with the woman he loved. Tom closed his eyes, trying to remember when their conversations became shorter and their evenings became quieter. Maybe it didn't start today. Maybe they had been moving away for a long time, and he simply didn't notice. But he knew one thing for sure. If they didn't find the answer, this wrapper would be the end of everything they had. Tom sat on the living room sofa, staring at the empty plate of toast that he hadn't put away. The silence in the house was deafening. The radio in the kitchen had long since turned off, and the only sound was the distant barking of the neighbor's dog. The condom wrapper remained on the kitchen table. He did not dare either throw it away or take it with him. She seemed to charge the air in the house with tension, and Tom felt it even here, a few meters from the kitchen. His hands lay on his knees, his fingers nervously fiddling with the seam of his jeans. He tried to collect his thoughts, but they scattered like frightened birds. He leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes. 20 years. 20 years with Clara. Their first meeting in college, when she spilled coffee on his textbook and laughed so contagiously that he could not be angry. Their wedding in her parents' small garden, where she tripped over the hem of her dress, and he caught her. Both laughed until they cried. The birth of Jake, when they sat in the hospital half the night, holding hands, scared and happy. Emma, their unexpected gift when they thought they couldn't handle another child. All these moments were real, alive. Clara was his person. How could he think that she was capable of cheating? But the wrapper was real too. Tom opened his eyes and looked at his hands as if they could give the answer. He didn't want to believe that Clara would betray him. It went against everything he knew about her. She was the one who reminded him of anniversaries, who left notes on the refrigerator with silly emojis, who cried over old family videos. But then where did this damn wrapper come from? He tried to come up with an explanation except the most terrible one. Maybe one of the children, but Jake lived in California and Emma was in a college dorm 2 hours away. And they didn't bring their clothes here to be washed. Maybe one of the guests. But who? They rarely received guests, except... Tom frowned. Laura, Clara's sister, visited them 3 days ago. She came to a homecoming and spent the night in their guest room. He remembered her throwing her jeans into the washing machine, laughing that she had spilled wine on them. But Laura is married. She has Mark. Is she... Tom shook his head. It was too much. He didn't want to delve into someone else's life, but the thought stuck like a thorn. He got up and went to the window. A neighbor's boy was riding his bicycle down the street, and across the street Mrs. Kelly was watering her roses. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary. But chaos was raging inside Tom. He felt like a traitor for suspecting Clara, but he couldn't just brush the fact aside. He had to talk to her, but how? After what he said, after she left, slamming the door. He saw the pain in her eyes, and it killed him. But his own pain did not go away. Tom returned to the sofa and took the phone. He opened their family album, hundreds of photographs that Clara loved to sort through. Here they are on the beach when Jake was 5 and building a sandcastle. Here's Clara and Emma at the prom, both beaming. Here was their last trip to the mountains, where they sat around the fire and Clara laughed at his attempts to roast marshmallows. He looked at her face, at her smile, and felt his throat tighten. He loved her. God, how he loved her. But why couldn't he just trust her then? Clara walked along the path in the park, her sneakers crunching on the gravel. She pulled up the hood of her jacket. Although the morning was warm, she wanted to hide from the world. The park was almost empty, except for a couple of joggers and a woman with a stroller in the distance. Clara breathed deeply, trying to calm her heart, which was still pounding from the fight. Her cheeks were burning, and her chest felt heavy, as if someone had put a stone there. She stopped at a bench and sat down, looking at the pond where the ducks were swimming. Her thoughts were confused. Wrapper. That damn wrapper. Where did she come from? Clara knew it wasn't hers. And not Tom. They haven't used condoms since they decided their family was complete. The vasectomy was their mutual decision, and Clara never regretted it. So how did this thing get in their dryer? She closed her eyes, replaying the past weeks in her head. Maybe it's one of the children. But Emma was in college and Jake was in California. They haven't come home since. She frowned. No, they were here 2 weeks ago, over the weekend. But they didn't wash their things. Or did they wash it? Clara shook her head. It was ridiculous. Her children would not leave such things in their house. Or would you? She felt her cheeks turn red at the thought. And then she remembered Laura. Her sister arrived 3 days ago. Laura was in town for a reunion and spent the night with them. Clara clearly remembered Laura throwing her clothes into the washing machine, complaining that her jeans smelled like cigarettes from the bar. Is this really Laura? But Laura is married to Mark. They have been married for 8 years. Clara knew that they had quarrels, but betrayal, it was too much. Clara took out her phone and opened her correspondence with Laura. The last message was from yesterday. Laura wrote that she returned safely to Seattle and thanked her for the hospitality. Clara looked at the words, trying to find something suspicious in them, but it was ordinary text. She wanted to call Laura right now to ask, but she stopped. What if it's not Laura? And if Laura is offended by such an accusation? Clara knew how much her sister hated being suspected of something. She put the phone away and wrapped her arms around herself. Her thoughts returned to Tom. His words, his gaze cold, almost alien, cut like a knife. Did he really think she might cheat on him? After everything they've been through, Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she brushed them away. She was angry. Angry at Tom for not believing her. Angry at herself for not being able to convince him. And angry at this stupid rapper that turned their lives upside down. Clara stood up and walked further, her steps becoming faster. She didn't know how to get home, how to look into Tom's eyes. The sun was already setting when Clara returned home. Her sneakers were covered in dust from her long walk in the park, and her hair, escaping from under her hood, was stuck to her neck. She stood at the front door, holding the key in her hand, and hesitated for a second. She didn't want to go back to the house where the morning had begun with an argument, where the condom wrapper still lay on the kitchen table like a silent reproach. But she knew that she couldn't run away any further. If she and Tom don't talk, things will only get worse. She took a deep breath, turned the key, and entered. The house was quiet. The lights in the kitchen were off, and only the lamp in the living room was dim. Tom sat on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees and his hands clutching his phone. He raised his head when he heard her footsteps. His face was tired, his eyes were red, but there was a spark of relief in them. "You're back," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. Clara nodded, taking off her jacket and hanging it on a hook. She felt his gaze, but didn't look at him until she walked over to the couch and sat down at the opposite end. The distance between them, just a couple of meters, seemed insurmountable. "I couldn't just walk around all day," she said, her tone even but determined. "We need to talk, Tom. For real." Tom put the phone down and turned to her. His fingers tapped nervously on his knee. "I know," he said. I didn't mean for it to turn out like this, Clar. In the morning, I shouldn't have attacked you like that." Clara looked at him, her eyebrows raised slightly. She expected an apology, but that wasn't quite it. There was still a hint of wariness in his voice, as if he didn't fully trust her. It stung, but she forced herself to focus. "You accused me of cheating, Tom," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Do you really think that I could, after everything we've had?" Tom looked away, his jaw tense. He ran his hand over his face, as if trying to erase the fatigue. "I don't think you." He hesitated, searching for words. "I don't know what to think. This thing, it just shouldn't be here. And I can't just pretend she's not there." Clara nodded, her lips pursed. She understood him. The wrapper was real, and she couldn't ignore it either. But her pain from his mistrust has not gone away. "I don't know where she's from either," she said. "But I didn't cheat on you, and it hurts me that you even thought for a second that I could." Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and confusion. "I don't want to think that way, Clara," he said. "Is it true? But how to explain this? It's not mine, not yours. Then whose?" Clara took a deep breath. She spent the whole day trying to find the answer, going over every little detail in her head. And now, sitting here, she knew they had to do this together. "Let's try to figure it out," she said, her voice becoming a little softer. "No shouting, no charges, just, let's think about where this could have come from." Tom nodded, although there was still wariness in his gaze. "Okay," he said, "where do we start?" Clara leaned back on the sofa, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. "Let's remember the last week," she suggested. "Who was in the house? What did we wash? Maybe this will give some clue." Tom frowned, his gaze becoming distant, as if he was trying to reconstruct the events. "Well, he said. "You, me. The children didn't come. Jake is in California, Emma is in college. None of them washed anything here." Clara nodded, her thoughts going in the same direction. "Exactly," she said. "I washed my things yours. Nothing unusual. Bed linen, towels." She fell silent, her eyes suddenly widening. Tom noticed this and leaned a little closer. "What?" he asked. "Did you remember something?" Clara slowly turned to him, her face turning pale. "Laura," she said quietly, almost in a whisper. "Laura was here." Tom blinked, his eyebrows raised. "Your sister?" he asked again. "When?" "3 days ago," Clara said, her voice becoming a little louder. "She came to the alumni meeting. Spent the night with us. Do you remember? She threw her jeans in the washing machine because she spilled wine on them." Tom leaned back, his face becoming serious. He remembered Laura, her loud laugh, how she burst into the house with a bottle of wine and stories about old school friends. She was only in their house for a day, but she washed clothes. He felt his stomach tighten. "You think?" He began, but fell silent, not wanting to voice the thought. Clara looked at him, her eyes full of worry. "Is it really Laura?" she whispered. "But she's with Mark. They are married." She wouldn't. Tom pursed his lips. He didn't know Laura as well as Clara. She always seemed too impulsive to him, but cheating. It was serious. Yet it was the only explanation that made sense. "Maybe it's not her," he said, but his tone was uncertain. "Maybe it's someone else?" Clara shook her head, her fingers gripping the armrest of the sofa. "Who, Tom?" she asked. There was no one else, just us and Laura. They fell silent, looking at each other. The tension that separated them in the morning eased a little, but a new anxiety took its place. If it's Laura, what does that mean? So what should they do now? "We need to talk to her," Tom said, his voice firm. "Call her." Clara shuddered, her hand instinctively reached for the phone, but stopped. "Right now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Tom, what if it's her condom? I don't want to blame my sister for that kind of thing. Like it if you feel like a shocking truth is about to be revealed. Subscribe to find out what secret Laura was so desperate to hide. What if it's her?" Tom said, his gaze was serious. "Clara, we can't just sit and guess. We need to know." Clara looked at the phone lying on the coffee table. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She opened Laura's contact, her thumb hovering over the call button. She knew that this call could change everything not only for her and Tom, but also for her sister, for her marriage. But she also knew that she couldn't live with this question hanging over their heads. "Okay," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I'll call." Tom nodded, his face tense. He moved a little closer, as if getting ready to support her. Clara pressed the call button and turned on the speakerphone. The beeps echoed through the quiet living room, each one seeming louder than the last. They waited, their eyes glued to the phone, and there was a feeling in the air that Laura's answer would change everything. The living room was in twilight, only the dim light of the lamp cast shadows on the walls. Tom and Clara were sitting on the sofa, their eyes glued to the phone lying on the coffee table. The beeps coming from the speaker sounded loud, almost deafening in the silence of the house. Clara clutched the armrest of the sofa, her nails digging into the fabric. Tom sat leaning forward slightly, his hands nervously fiddling with the hem of his t-shirt. Each beep increased the tension, and Clara felt her heart pounding in her chest. She almost hoped Laura wouldn't answer. But on the fourth ring, there was a click, and her sister's cheerful voice filled the room. "Clara," Laura exclaimed, her tone light, as if she had just finished laughing. "I didn't expect your call so soon." "Miss me already?" Clara opened her mouth, but the words stuck. She looked at Tom for support. He nodded, his face serious, almost stern. Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in her voice. "Hi, Laura," she said, her tone even but tense. "Can you talk now?" Laura laughed. There was a carefree air in her voice. "Of course I can. I just returned from work. I'm sitting with a glass of wine. What do you have there? Everything is fine." Clara swallowed, her fingers gripping the phone tighter. She hated this conversation, hated the thought of having to blame her sister. But the wrapper, still lying on the kitchen table, left no choice. "Laura," she began, her voice becoming quieter, "we need to ask something. This is serious." Laura's tone changed, her gaiety evaporated. "Seriously?" she asked, wariness appearing in her voice. "What's happened? Are the children okay? With Emma, Jake?" "The kids are okay," Clara said quickly, feeling her cheeks heat up. This, this is about something else. Tom found something in the dryer this morning." Tom leaned closer to the phone, his eyes glued to the screen as if he could see Laura through it. "A condom wrapper," he said, his voice low and firm. "In our dryer." There was silence on the other end of the line. Clara heard Laura inhale sharply, and her heart sank. She knew that sound the way Laura breathed when she tried to hide her panic. Clara exchanged a glance with Tom, his brows furrowed. "Laura," Clara called, her voice trembling. "Are you there?" "Yes, I'm here," Laura answered, but her voice was no longer so confident. "Wrapper? In your dryer? This is weird." "Very strange," Tom said, his tone becoming sharper. "Because Clara and I don't use condoms. Already 10 years, so it's not ours or one of us is lying, and it's clearly not me." Clara glanced at him, begging him to be gentler, but Tom did not back down. He looked at the phone, his jaw tense. "Laura, you visited us 3 days ago," Clara continued, trying to speak calmly. "You washed your jeans. We're just trying to figure out. Is this yours?" Silence again. Clara heard Laura put her glass on the table, a light glass clink. She pictured her sister sitting in her Seattle apartment, her long red hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her face probably pale by now. "My?" Laura asked, her voice higher than usual. "Clara, are you serious? Do you think I—" "What?" "We don't think so," Clara said, her voice becoming softer. "We're just asking, because there is no one else. No one else washed anything for us." Laura let out a nervous laugh, but it was quickly cut off. This is some kind of mistake," she said. "Maybe it's old, maybe from laundry that has been lying around for a long time." Tom shook his head, although Laura couldn't see him. "No, Laura," he said. "We do laundry regularly. This thing ended up in the dryer recently, and you were the last one to use the car." Clara closed her eyes, her fingers gripping the armrest. She hated this conversation, hated how it sounded like an interrogation, but she couldn't stop. They should have known. "Laura, please," she said quietly. "If it's yours, just say it. We will not judge. It is important for me that Tom knows that this is not mine. Our marriage is on the rocks." There was a long exhalation from the other end of the line. Clara imagined Laura sitting with her head down, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her sweater, a habit that always betrayed her nervousness. When Laura spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Okay," she said. This is mine." Clara felt her stomach tighten. Tom straightened up, his eyes widening. They waited with bated breath. "It was at a high school reunion," Laura continued, her voice trembling. I got drunk. There was one guy there. We studied together. Well, it happened. Once. I didn't even think. The wrapper must have been left in my jeans pocket. I didn't know it ended up in the dryer. I swear." Clara opened her mouth, but found no words. She looked at Tom. His face was stony. She knew what he was thinking. Laura was married. For Mark, and she just admitted to cheating. Laura, Clara began, her voice full of shock. Did you cheat on Mark? Laura sobbed, and Clara realized that she was crying. It was a mistake, Clar, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want to. I was drunk. I don't know how it happened, but it was one time and I regret it. God, I'm so sorry. Tom clenched his fists and his face turned red. He leaned towards the phone. And you just left that wrapper in our things, he said, his voice full of anger. Do you even understand what we went through today because of this? Tom, Clara hissed, her eyes begging him to shut up. She turned to the phone. Laura, why didn't you tell me? You knew that we could find. I didn't think so, Laura interrupted, her voice full of panic. I was in such a state after that night. I just threw my jeans in the wash and forgot about them. Clara, please, you don't understand how ashamed I am. Clara felt her throat tighten. She was angry with Laura, but she was even more hurt. Laura was her little sister, the one for whom she always felt responsible. And now she was sitting in Seattle crying because she had made a mistake that could have destroyed her marriage. Laura, Clara said quietly, what are you going to do with Mark? Laura sobbed louder. I don't know, she said. I can't tell him. This will kill him. Clara, please don't tell him. I beg you. It was a mistake. I will never do it again. Please. Tom snorted, his face showing disgust. Clara glanced at him, begging him not to interfere. She knew what he was thinking that Mark deserved to know, but she was not ready for this conversation. Not now. Laura, she said, her voice firm, we need to think. This is serious. We can't just pretend nothing happened. I know, Laura said, her voice filled with despair. But Clara, you are my sister. You won't tell Mark, right? Please give me time. I'll figure it out. I'll fix it. Clara looked at Tom. His eyes were full of determination, but he remained silent, letting her speak. She knew that he did not agree with Laura, but he was waiting for her decision. Clara closed her eyes, her fingers trembling. I don't know, Laura, she said finally. We need time. We'll call you back. Clara, please, Laura began, but Clara pressed the end call button. The beep stopped, and the living room fell silent again. Clara leaned back on the sofa, her breathing heavy. Tom looked at her, his face a mixture of anger and fatigue. She cheated on Mark, he said quietly, as if confirming it to himself. And he wants us to remain silent. Clara nodded, her eyes full of tears. She's my sister, Tom, she said, but I don't know what to do. They sat in silence, their hands lay on the sofa, but did not touch each other. Laura's confession provided an answer, but no relief. It just made everything more complicated. The living room seemed colder than usual, although the thermostat showed the usual 22 degrees. The light from the lamp cast long shadows on the walls, and the phone lying on the coffee table still carried the echo of Laura's voice, her tears, her panic. Clara sat at one end of the sofa, hugging herself with her arms, her face pale, her eyes red from pent-up tears. Tom sat opposite him, his elbows resting on his knees, his fingers squeezing each other so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Laura's confession hung between them like a heavy curtain, separating them even more than their morning argument. Clara was the first to break the silence. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but there was pain in it. I can't believe she did this, she said, looking at the floor. Laura, she's always been impulsive, but cheating, Mark, this is not her. Tom snorted, his face tense. Isn't she? He asked, his voice full of sarcasm. Clara, she just confessed. Got drunk, slept with some guy. It's not her. It's her choice. Clara looked up, her brows furrowed. Don't do that, Tom, she said, her tone becoming harsher. She's my sister. She was crying. She's sorry. It was a mistake. Error. Tom straightened up, his eyes narrowed. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or losing your keys. And this is betrayal, Clara. She cheated on her husband, and now he wants us to cover her. Clara shook her head, her fingers clenching at the sleeves of her sweater. She didn't ask to cover for us, she said, although her voice wavered, betraying uncertainty. She asked for time, to figure it out. She knows what she did. Tom stood up, unable to sit still. He began to walk around the living room, his steps heavy, almost angry. "Figure out," he said, his voice getting louder. "Clara, there's nothing to understand here. She slept with another guy. Mark deserves to know. If it were you." He paused, his face turning red, as if he regretted his words. Clara froze, her eyes widened in pain. "If it were me?" she asked. Her voice was full of resentment. "Are you really going to say that, Tom, after accusing me of the same thing this morning?" Tom stopped, turning to her. His face softened, but only for a second. "That's not what I meant," he said, his voice becoming quieter. "I'm just saying, if you did that, I'd want to know. I wouldn't want to live with a lie. Mark is a good guy. He doesn't deserve to be kept in the dark." Clara stood up, her hands clenched into fists. She stepped towards him, her cheeks flushed. "Does Laura deserve to have her life ruined?" she said, her voice trembling with anger. "Do you even understand what will happen if Mark finds out? It's not just a fight, Tom. This could be the end of their marriage. Do you want my sister to be left alone because of one mistake?" Tom looked at her, his eyebrows raised. "One mistake?" he said, his tone full of disbelief. "Clara, this is not a mistake. It's a choice. She chose to get drunk. I chose to leave with this guy, and now she wants us to remain silent while she figures it out. It's not fair to Mark." Clara shook her head, her eyes shining with tears. "You talk as if everything is simple," she said. "As if you could just tell me and everything would be okay. But that's not true. Laura is my sister. I know her. She's not bad. She's just confused." Tom snorted, crossing his arms. "Confused?" he said. "Clara, you are too soft with her. Always was. Laura does what she wants, and you shield her. Like when she dropped out of college, and you spent weeks talking to your parents to stop them from yelling at her. Or when she borrowed money from us and didn't pay it back. You always protect her." Clara opened her mouth, but closed it, her face turning pale. His words touched her because they were true. She always felt responsible for Laura, her younger sister, who was always getting into trouble. But this was different. It was too serious. "It's not the same thing, Tom," she said, her voice full of pain. "It's not about money or college. It's about her marriage, about her life. And you stand here as if you don't care what happens to her." Tom stepped towards her, his face a mixture of anger and disappointment. "I care, Clara," he said, "but I don't like it when people lie, especially those who trust them. Mark trusts Laura, and if we remain silent, we will be part of this lie. Do you really want this?" Clara turned away, her hands shaking. She walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. The neighbors' lanterns were on, but their light seemed cold. She thought about Laura, about her laughter, about how they shared secrets as children, about how Laura cried at her wedding, hugging Mark. She couldn't imagine her sister losing it all. But she also thought about Mark, the quiet, kind guy who always sent them cards at Christmas. He didn't deserve to be lied to. Still, the thought of telling him seemed unbearable. "I don't know what I want, Tom," she said finally, her voice barely audible. I don't want everything to fall apart. For Laura, for us." Tom looked at her, his face softening. He took a step forward, but stopped, not daring to come closer. "For us?" he asked. His voice was quieter. "Clara, this already concerns us. Look what this rapper did to us. We shout at each other, we suspect. I don't want us to be like that." Clara turned to him, her eyes filled with tears. "Then why are you so harsh?" she said. "Why can't you just give Laura a chance? Give me a chance to figure it out. You immediately decided that you had to tell everything, as if there was no other way." Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping. He looked tired, as if he had been carrying something heavy all day. "Because I don't see any other way, Clara," he said. "Honesty is the only thing that makes sense. If we remain silent, we will be lying to Mark. and I don't want to live with this. Clara shook her head, her tears finally falling. She wiped them with her sleeve, but her voice was shaking. And I don't want to ruin my sister's life, she said. And I don't want our marriage to fall apart because of this. But you do everything to make this happen. Tom opened his mouth to answer, but fell silent. Her words hit him, and he felt his anger turn to fear. He didn't want to lose Clara, but he didn't know how to step back from what he believed in. I don't want us to fall apart, he said quietly, but I can't pretend that everything is fine. Clara looked at him, her face full of pain and fatigue. Then we need time, she said, to think, to decide, together. Tom nodded, although there was still determination in his eyes. Okay, he said, but we can't wait forever, Clara. It's not just about Laura. This is about us. She didn't answer, just turned to the window. They stood in silence, separated not only by the sofa, but also by the choice they had to make. Laura's confession answered one question, but gave rise to another, much more difficult one: what to do with the truth that could destroy everything. The Reynolds house fell into silence, but it was not the usual cozy silence of a Saturday evening, but heavy, oppressive, like the air before a thunderstorm. The light in the living room had long gone out, and only a weak beam from a street lamp made its way through the curtains, drawing stripes on the floor. Clara and Tom went to separate rooms without saying another word after their argument. The bedroom door remained closed, and the guest room, where the children or Laura usually slept, became Tom's refuge for the first time in years. The condom wrapper still lay on the kitchen counter, small and shiny, a reminder that their world had changed in one day. Tom lay on the narrow bed in the guest room, his hands folded behind his head, his eyes staring at the ceiling. The dim light from the alarm clock on the nightstand showed 11:47. He couldn't sleep. The bed was too hard, the pillow too thin, but that was not the point. His thoughts were spinning, returning to the conversation with Clara, to her words, to her tears. He felt guilty, but he couldn't figure out what exactly: for blaming her in the morning, for insisting on the truth with Laura, or for not being able to find words to stop their argument. He turned his head, looking at the photo on the nightstand, a family photo of them from last year's Christmas. Clara smiled, hugging Emma. Jake stood nearby, rolling his eyes, but with a slight smirk. Tom was behind him, his hand on Clara's shoulder. They were happy then, or at least he thought so. But now he wondered, when did they start growing apart? When did their conversations become shorter and their evenings become quieter? Maybe this rap was just an excuse for it all to spill out. Tom sighed and stared at the ceiling again. He thought about Laura. Her confession still rang in his ears, her trembling voice, her tears. He wasn't close to Laura, but he knew what she meant to Clara, and yet her actions seemed unforgivable to him. Cheating is not just a mistake, as Clara tried to make it out to be. It's a choice, and Laura did it, knowing that she had Mark who trusted her. Tom imagined himself in Mark's place. What would it be like to find out that the person you love has betrayed you? He shuddered at the thought. But then he thought about Clara. Her words, "You are too harsh," echoed in his head. Maybe she was right. Maybe he judged Laura too quickly without giving her a chance. He knew Laura wasn't perfect. She was always the one who acted without thinking, dropping out of college, getting involved in dubious projects, quarreling with her parents. But Clara always protected her, always saw the good in her. And now Clara looked at him, Tom, as a stranger, because he did not want to give Laura this chance. Tom turned over on his side, the pillow creaking under his head. He hated this room. He hated this night. He wanted to be in their bedroom, next to Clara, hugging her, as they had done before when quarrels ended in reconciliation. But now he didn't know how to approach her. He was afraid that anything he said would only make the situation worse. And yet the thought of keeping silent about Laura's action seemed wrong to him. Mark deserved the truth, but at what cost? Clara lay curled up under the covers in their bedroom. The pillow was damp with tears that she could no longer hold back. She hated crying. It made her feel weak, helpless. But today she couldn't stop. Everything that happened that day, Tom's accusations, Laura's confession, their argument, fell on her like a heavy burden. She felt like she was losing everything. Her connection with her sister, her husband's trust, the very foundation of their marriage. She looked at the empty half of the bed where Tom usually slept. His pillow lay untouched, and this made her loneliness even more acute. They never slept separately, even after the most violent quarrels. Even when Jake was a baby and cried all night, they found a way to be together, to hold on to each other. But today Tom chose the guest room, and it was like an admission that their breakup had become real. Clara wiped her tears with the sleeve of her pajamas and sat down, hugging her knees. She thought about Laura. Her little sister had always been like a second child to her, impulsive, but kind, always ready to make her laugh. Clara remembered how Laura would come running to her as a child, hiding from her mother's lectures, how they would whisper at night, sharing their dreams. Even when Laura grew up and made mistakes, Clara was there, helping and supporting. But this was too much. Cheating on Mark, Clara couldn't understand it. Still, she couldn't just turn her back on Laura. She heard her tears on the phone, her despair. Laura was scared, and Clara couldn't leave her. But then she thought about Tom. His words, "We will be part of this lie," cut her because there was truth in them. She knew Mark deserved to know. He was a good man, always treating Laura with patience, which Clara sometimes did not understand. But the thought of telling him felt like a betrayal to Laura. And Clara hated Tom because he forced her to choose between her sister and the truth. She hated him for his inflexibility, for the fact that he did not see how it was tearing her apart. Clara stood up and went to the window. She pulled back the curtain, looking out onto the dark street. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled, and this sound only intensified her feeling of loneliness. She thought about going to Tom, knocking on the guest room door, telling him they could make things right. But she didn't know how to start. His accusations in the morning, his cold gaze, all this stood between them. And the wrapper, still lying on the kitchen table, was like a physical reminder of their split. She returned to the bed and lay down, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Her thoughts rushed between Laura and Tom, between duty and love. She knew that tomorrow they would have to talk again, but now she felt too tired, too broken. She closed her eyes, hoping that sleep would give her some peace, but the tears continued to flow until she finally fell into a restless sleep. Sunday morning came quietly at the Reynolds house, without the usual noise of the coffee maker or the radio that Tom usually turned on. Light filtered through the kitchen curtains, illuminating the table where the condom wrapper still lay. None of them dared to remove it. Clara woke up first, her eyes swollen from tears and a sleepless night. She lay in their bedroom, looking at the empty half of the bed, and felt her heart clench. Tom slept in the guest room, and this distance seemed like an abyss to her. But she knew that they could not continue like this in silence, in resentment. Today they had to talk, even if it hurt. Clara got up, put on an old sweater, and went down to the kitchen. She turned on the coffee maker, and the familiar gurgling sound calmed her down a little. She placed 2 mugs on the table, hoping Tom would join. She needed to see him, to hear his voice, even if they quarreled again. She couldn't lose him. Tom woke up to the smell of coffee wafting into the guest room. His back ached from the uncomfortable bed, and his head felt heavy, like after a long day at work. He lay looking at the ceiling and thought about Clara. Her words yesterday, "You are doing everything to make this happen," did not give him peace. He didn't want to ruin their marriage. But he also couldn't pretend that everything was fine. He stood up, pulled on jeans and a t-shirt, and headed into the kitchen. Clara was sitting at the table, holding a mug with both hands. She looked up as Tom entered, and her face softened, although there was still weariness in her eyes. "Good morning," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. "Good," answered Tom, stopping at the threshold. He looked at her disheveled hair and dark circles under her eyes, and felt a pang of guilt. He did it to her, or they did it to each other. "Coffee?" she asked, pointing to the second mug. Tom nodded and sat down opposite. He took the mug, but didn't drink, just held it, feeling the warmth through the ceramic. They were silent for several seconds, and this silence was uncomfortable, but not as hostile as yesterday. "I didn't sleep almost all night," Clara said, her eyes glued to the mug. "I was thinking about us, about Laura. About everything. Tom nodded, his fingers tapping the mug. Me too, he said. This room, it's not for sleeping. But that's not the point. Clara looked at him, her eyebrows raised slightly. And what? She asked. Her voice was cautious, but there was hope in it. Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping. He didn't know how to start, but he knew he had to be honest. If they were going to survive this, they needed to tell the truth not just about Laura, but about themselves. I was thinking about what you said, he began, his voice low. That I'm too Sue concurrent session exception. Maybe you're right. Maybe I decided too quickly that Laura didn't deserve a chance. But I can't just forget what she did, and I can't pretend that this doesn't affect us. Clara nodded, her eyes full of attention. I know, she said. I can't forget either. Laura, she broke my heart, but she's my sister, Tom. I can't just turn my back on her. Tom looked at her, his face softening. I'm not asking you to turn away, he said, but I don't want us to lie. Not Mark, and not to each other. Clara swallowed, her fingers gripping the mug tighter. She knew he was right, but the thought of telling Mark still scared her. But she also knew that their own problems were deeper than what Laura had done. We didn't really talk, Tom, she said, her voice shaking. Not about Laura, but about us. I avoided it. In recent years, maybe even longer. We're just living, work, kids, bills. I didn't notice how we stopped being close. Tom blinked, her words taking him by surprise. He put the mug down and leaned a little closer. Do you think we've grown apart? He asked. His voice was full of surprise, but there was also pain in it. Clara nodded, her eyes shining with tears. Yes, she said. We don't quarrel, we don't shout, but when was the last time we talked about something important? Not about Bill's or Emma's schedule. About us. We are afraid of what we want. I don't even know what's in your heart, Tom. Tom looked away, his jaw tense. Her words hurt him because they were true. He felt it too, the emptiness that grew between them, but he did not want to notice it. He thought it was normal that this happens after 20 years of marriage. But now he saw how it weakened them. It's my fault too, he said finally, his voice hoarse. I didn't say so. I didn't want to burden you. You already have a job, children. I thought I could handle it myself. Clara looked at him, her eyebrows furrowed. What to cope with? She asked, her voice filled with worry. Tom, what were you hiding? He sighed, his fingers fiddling with the edge of the table. He hated talking about these things, but he knew he had to. I feel old, Clar, he said, his voice barely audible. I'm 48. Work. It's not the same anymore. I'm not the cool programmer I was. Young guys come, know more, do things faster. I'm afraid that I will soon become useless to anyone. And I'm afraid you do too. Clara opened her mouth, but found no words. She leaned towards him, her hand reaching for his, but stopped. Tom, she said, her voice full of pain, why didn't you tell me? Do you think I need some cool programmer? I need you. Always needed. Tom looked at her, his eyes filled with a vulnerability he rarely showed. I know, he said, but sometimes I feel like I don't measure up. You are so alive, Clara. You help people, change their lives, and I'm just sitting at the computer. And when I found this rapper, I thought maybe you'd found someone better. Clara shook her head, her tears finally falling. No one is better, she said, her voice trembling. Nobody, but I'm also to blame. I didn't ask, I didn't notice. I let us get stuck in this routine, and now this rapper. It just showed how far we've come. Tom nodded, his hand finally covering hers. Her fingers were cold, but he squeezed them, feeling the warmth return. We shouldn't have come to this, he said. But we got there, and I don't want this to break us. Clara looked at him, her face wet with tears, but determination flashed in her eyes. Me too, she said. But we need help, Tom. We can't do it alone. I think we should see a therapist. Tom blinked, her offer surprising him. He never believed in therapy. It seemed to him that it was for those who had everything really bad. But looking at Clara, with their hands clasped on the table, he realized that they could not continue like this. "Okay," he said quietly, "let's try. For us." Clara nodded, her lips twitching into a faint smile. For the first time that day, she felt a glimmer of hope. But the wrapper was still on the table, and the question of Laura and Mark hung over them. They knew this wasn't the end, but now, in this moment, they chose to fight for their marriage. And that was the beginning. Clara pressed the call button, turned on the speakerphone, and put the phone on the table. The beeps echoed through the kitchen, each one seeming louder than the last. Clara clenched her hands into fists, her nails digging into her palms. Tom looked at the phone, his jaw tense. They waited, and the tension between them grew with each beep. On the third ring, Laura answered. Her voice was tired, with a slight hoarseness, as if she had not slept. "Clara?" she said, her tone wary. "It's you." Clara swallowed, her throat dry. "Yes, Laura," she said. "And Tom is here too. We need to talk." There was silence on the other end of the line. Clara heard Laura take a deep breath and imagined her sitting in her Seattle apartment, her eyes puffy from crying. "About what?" Laura asked, her voice full of anxiety. Did you tell Mark?" "No," Clara said quickly, her voice becoming softer. "We didn't tell. But we need to decide what to do next." Laura made a faint sound, like a sob. "Thank you," she said. I don't know how to thank you. I know what I did, and I—" "Laura," Tom interrupted, his voice firm, but not angry. "We don't call to listen to apologies. We need to know what you're going to do." Clara glanced at him, asking him to be gentler, but Tom continued to look at the phone, his face serious. "What? What do you mean?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "I said it was a mistake. I'm not going to repeat this. I need time." Clara leaned closer to the phone, her hands still clenched. "Laura, we understand that this is difficult for you," she said, trying to speak calmly. "But this is not only about you. This is about Mark, and about us. We can't just pretend nothing happened." "I know," Laura said, her voice breaking. "But if Mark finds out, it will ruin everything. He won't forgive me. Please, Clara, you are my sister. You can't." "We don't want to ruin your marriage," Clara interrupted, her voice full of pain. "But we can't lie to Mark. He deserves the truth." Tom nodded, his eyes glued to the phone. "We offer a compromise, Laura," he said. "You have a month. You tell Mark yourself, or we'll do it for you." There was silence on the other end of the line. Clara heard Laura sob, and her heart sank. She imagined her sister sitting alone, her face streaked with tears. She wanted to say something comforting, but the words got stuck in her throat. "Month," Laura finally said, her voice full of panic. "Tom, Clara, I don't know if I can. It's too fast. I'm not ready." "You have to be ready," Tom said, his tone adamant. "You made a choice, Laura. Now you need to deal with him. Mark doesn't deserve to live a lie." Clara closed her eyes, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. She hated this conversation, hated how it sounded like a sentence. But she knew Tom was right. They couldn't hide the truth forever. "Laura," she said quietly, "I don't want to hurt you. You are my sister, and I love you. But we cannot remain silent. If you tell Mark yourself, you'll have a chance to make things right. But if he finds out from us, it will be worse." Laura sobbed louder, her breathing ragged. I don't know how to do this," she said. "I'm afraid, Clara. I'm afraid he will leave, that I will be left alone." Clara felt her eyes fill with tears. She wanted to console Laura, to say that everything would be fine, but she couldn't. She knew that the truth could destroy Laura's marriage, and this thought tore her apart. "I know you're afraid," she said, her voice shaking. "But you have to try. For Mark's sake, for your own sake." Tom looked at Clara, his face a mixture of respect and concern. He knew how hard it was for her, but he was proud that she was holding on. "A month, Laura," he repeated. "That's all we can give. If you don't tell us, we'll be forced to." Laura was silent for several seconds, her sobbing the only sound. When she spoke, her voice was full of despair. "Okay," she said. I'll try. I promise. Just please don't tell him. Give me a chance." Clara nodded, although Laura could not see her. "We'll give you a chance," she said. "But you have to be honest, Laura. With Mark and with yourself." I, I'll try," Laura said, her voice barely audible. "Thank you, Clara. Volume. I, I don't deserve this." Clara opened her mouth to answer, but Laura hung up. The beep stopped, and the kitchen fell silent again. Clara leaned back in her chair, her face wet with tears. She felt guilty, as if she had betrayed her sister, but also relieved that they had taken a step forward. Tom looked at her, his hand reached out to hers, but stopped. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Clara shook her head, wiping her tears with her sleeve. "No," she said, "but I have to be. We did what we had to do." Tom nodded, his face serious. "That's right, Clar," he said. "Honesty is the only way, even if it hurts." Clara looked at him. Her eyes were full of fatigue, but a spark of determination flashed in them. "I know," she said, "but I still feel terrible. She's my sister, Tom." "I know," he said, his voice becoming quieter, "and I don't want you to choose between her and me. But we do this to be honest. With you. With Mark." Clara nodded, her hand finally finding his. Their fingers intertwined, and this small gesture was like a bridge across the abyss that separated them yesterday. 2 weeks after the ultimatum to Laura passed in the Reynolds house in a strange calm, Clara and Tom tried to return to normal life. He went to work, she spent her days at school helping students. They made an appointment with a family therapist, and their first session was scheduled for the following week. But the shadow of Laura's actions still hung over them. Clara checked her phone every day, waiting for a message from her sister, hoping that Laura would find the strength to tell Mark the truth. Tom, on the contrary, became more and more impatient, his sense of justice struggling with a desire to support Clara. They avoided talking about Laura, but they both knew that the month they had given her was inexorably approaching its end. Friday evening was quiet. Clara was cooking dinner pasta with pesto, her attempt at something normal. Tom sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through work emails on his laptop, but his eyes kept returning to Clara. She looked tired, her movements were mechanical, as if she was performing a task to avoid thinking. He wanted to ask if Laura had called, but he was afraid to upset the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. Clara's phone, lying on the table, suddenly vibrated and the screen lit up. Clara froze, holding the spoon over the pan. She looked at the phone, her face went pale. "This is Laura," she said quietly, wiping her hands on a towel. Tom closed his laptop and sat up straight, his heart rate picking up. "Answer," he said. His voice was calm, but there was tension in it. Clara nodded, her fingers trembling as she picked up the phone and put it on speaker. She pressed the answer button, and Laura's voice, full of panic, rushed into the kitchen. "Clara?" Laura said. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying. "Please tell me you're home. I need to talk." Clara swallowed, her gaze darting to Tom. "I'm home, Laura," she said, trying to speak evenly. "Tom is here too. What's happened?" Laura sobbed, and Clara heard her sniffle. I can't," Laura said, her voice shaking. "I tried, Clara. Is it true? But I can't tell Mark. I can't." Clara felt her stomach tighten. She looked at Tom, his face became stony, but he was silent, letting her speak. "Laura," Clara said, her voice full of anxiety, "what do you mean, I can't? You have 2 more weeks. We agreed." "I know we agreed," Laura interrupted, her voice becoming louder. "But you don't understand how hard it is. I look at Mark every day and he's so kind, so trusting. If I tell him, he'll leave. I'll lose him, Clara. I can't stand it." Tom leaned closer to the phone, his brow furrowed. "Laura," he said, his voice firm, "you knew you had a month. You promised. You can't just give up." Laura sobbed louder, her breathing ragged. "Tom, please," she said. "You don't know what it's like. I'm sorry, I really am. but I can't lose him. Please don't tell him. Give me more time. Clara opened her mouth to respond, but Tom raised his hand to stop her. His face was a mixture of anger and disappointment. More time, he said, his voice becoming harsher. Laura, we gave you a chance. You knew the conditions. Mark deserves the truth, and you know it. But this is my life, Laura almost shouted, her voice breaking. It's none of your business, Tom. Why can't you just be silent? This is between me and Mark. Clara shuddered, her eyes filled with tears. She hated how this conversation was unfolding and hated that her sister was so desperate. She reached for the phone, her voice filled with pain. Laura, please, she said. We don't want to harm you, but you have to be honest. If you don't tell, it will only get worse. Laura laughed, but it was a bitter, almost hysterical laugh. Worse, she said. Clara, it can't get any worse. I don't sleep, I don't eat. I walk around like a zombie because I know what I did. But I can't tell him. I can't. Tom shook his head, his face turning red. He leaned toward the phone, his voice low but full of determination. Then you leave us little choice, Laura, he said. If you don't tell us, we'll be forced to. Laura fell silent, her sobs the only sound. When she spoke, her voice was full of despair. You won't do this, she said. Clara, you are my sister. You won't betray me. Please tell him you won't let him. Clara felt her throat tighten. She looked at Tom. His eyes were full of determination, but there was a hint of guilt in them. She knew he was doing this out of principle, but her heart was torn between her sister and her husband. Laura, she said, her voice trembling, I love you. But we can't lie to Mark. You have until the end of the month. Please do it yourself. Laura sobbed again, but did not answer. A second later, the line went dead, and she hung up. Clara stared at the phone, her face wet with tears. She felt like she had betrayed her sister, even though she knew they had made the right choice. Tom leaned back in his chair, his face tense. She won't tell, he said quietly, as if confirming this to himself. She's too afraid. Clara wiped her tears with her sleeve, her voice hoarse. She's panicking, Tom, she said. She's not thinking clearly. Maybe if we give her a little more time. We gave her time, Clara, Tom interrupted, his voice firm but not angry. 2 weeks have passed, and she's already saying she can't. We can't wait any longer. Clara looked at him, her eyes full of pain. And what do you propose? She asked. Should I call Mark right now? Destroy their marriage? Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping. He hated this situation as much as Clara, but his sense of justice was stronger. I don't want to ruin their marriage, he said, but I don't want to be part of the lie. Mark deserves to know, and if Laura doesn't do it, I should. Clara shook her head, her hands shaking. Tom, please, she said. Let's wait. Just a couple more days. Maybe she'll change her mind. Tom looked at her, his face full of struggle. He knew how hard it was for Clara. He knew that she was torn between him and her sister. But he also knew he couldn't back down. Okay, he said finally, a couple of days. But if she doesn't call, I will. Clara nodded, her eyes full of gratitude, but also fear. She knew he wouldn't back down, and that scared her. 2 days later, on Sunday evening, Laura did not call. Clara sat in the living room, leafing through a book, but her gaze was empty, she was not reading. Tom entered the room holding the phone. His face was serious but determined. Clara, he said quietly, I have to do this. Clara looked up, her face turning pale. Tom, please, she said. Maybe she's still. She didn't call, he interrupted, his voice soft but firm. We gave her a chance. Now it's my turn. Clara opened her mouth to protest, but closed it. She knew he was right, but her heart ached for Laura. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Tom sat down on the sofa and opened Mark's contact. His fingers hovered over the call button for a second, but he took a deep breath and pressed. Clara clutched the armrest of the sofa, her breathing ragged. Mark answered on the second ring, his voice calm as always. Volume, he said. Hello, I didn't expect your call. Everything is fine. Tom swallowed, his throat dry. He looked at Clara, her eyes pleading with him to be careful. Hi, Mark, he said, trying to speak evenly. I, I need to talk to you about something serious. This is about Laura. Mark paused for a second, his voice becoming wary. About Laura, he asked again. What's happened? Is she okay? Tom closed his eyes, his fingers gripping the phone. She's fine, he said, but I have to tell you something. It's hard, Mark. Last week we found a condom wrapper in our dryer. She was wearing Laura's jeans. We talked to her, and she admitted that. At a high school reunion, she slept with another man. Clara covered her mouth with her hand, her tears streaming down her cheeks. She hated this moment, hated that this was happening. There was silence on the other end of the line. Tom heard Mark exhale slowly, but he didn't say a word. As the seconds ticked by, Tom felt his stomach tighten. Mark, he called. Are you there? Yes, Mark said finally. His voice was quiet, almost lifeless. I hear. Are you sure? Tom nodded, although Mark couldn't see him. Yes, he said. She confessed to us. She said it was a mistake, that she got drunk. But I thought you should know. Silence again. Clara looked at the phone, her breathing ragged. She imagined Mark sitting in their Seattle apartment, his face filled with shock. Thank you, Tom, Mark said finally. His voice was full of pain, but there was a sense of sincerity in it. For what he said. This explains a lot. Tom pursed his lips, his eyes full of guilt. I'm sorry, Mark, he said. I didn't mean to. I just thought you deserved the truth. I understand, Mark said. I need to think. I'll talk to Laura. If you need anything, said Tom, call. We are here. Thank you, Mark said, his voice trembling. I'll call. The line went dead. Tom put the phone on the table, his hands shaking. He looked at Clara. Her face was wet with tears. You did it, she said, her voice filled with pain. You told him. Tom nodded, his face tense. I had to, Clara, he said. It was right. Clara shook her head, her tears flowing faster. Right for whom? She said. For Mark? For you? What about Laura? What about me? Tom reached out to her, but she pulled away, getting up from her chair. I need to be alone, she said, her voice hoarse. She left the kitchen, leaving Tom alone. He looked after her, feeling his heart squeezing. He knew he had acted in good faith, but the cost was higher than he expected, and now he was afraid that this truth could cost him not only Laura, but also Clara. Clara sat in the kitchen, her fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that she didn't even drink. Her eyes were red, and her face was pale from a sleepless night. Tom's conversation with Mark last night still echoed in her head, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. Tom left for work early, saying he needed a distraction, but Clara knew he, too, felt the weight of his decision. She wanted to call Laura to check on her, but she was afraid to hear her voice, or worse, her silence. Clara's phone vibrated on the table, and she jumped, almost spilling her tea. Laura's name flashed on the screen. Clara felt her heart clench. She knew this call was inevitable, but she still wasn't ready. She took a deep breath, wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans, and pressed the answer button. Laura, she said, her voice was quiet, almost scared. How could you? Laura's voice burst into the phone, loud and full of rage. Clara recoiled as if she had been hit. How did you let him do this, Clara? He ruined my life. Clara clutched the phone, her fingers trembling. She expected pain, but not this kind of anger. Laura, please, she began, trying to speak calmly. Let's talk. What's happened? Mark, what's happened? Laura interrupted. Her voice was on the verge of screaming. Mark knows. Tom called him and told him everything. He came home last night and asked me if it was true. I didn't know what to say, Clara. He looked at me as if I were a stranger. Clara closed her eyes, her throat tightening. She imagined Mark, his quiet voice, his kind eyes, now full of pain, and Laura, her sister, who must have been standing in front of him, unable to justify herself. "I'm so sorry, Laura," Clara said, her voice shaking. We, we didn't want this to happen. We gave you time, but you said you couldn't tell." "Time?" Laura almost shouted the word. "You gave me a month as if it were some kind of damn ultimatum. I said that I was not ready, that I was afraid. And Tom just decided for me. He had no right." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes. She hated that Laura screamed so much. She hated that she couldn't calm her down. "Laura," she said, her voice full of pain, "we tried to be honest. Mark deserves to know. You know that yourself. We gave you a chance." "Honest?" Laura laughed, but it was a bitter, evil laugh. "This is not honesty, Clara. This is betrayal. You are my sister. You should have protected me, not let your husband ruin my marriage." Clara wiped away a tear, her hand shaking as she held the phone. "I tried to protect you," she said, her voice breaking. "I asked Tom to wait. I begged him to give you more time. But you didn't call, Laura. You didn't do anything. We couldn't remain silent forever." "You could," Laura shouted. "You could have told him to keep his mouth shut. This is my life, Clara, and now Mark doesn't look at me, doesn't talk. He was sleeping on the sofa, and I don't know what will happen next. It's all because of Tom." Clara shook her head, her tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt her heart breaking. She loved Laura, always protected her, but now her sister looked at her as an enemy. "It's not just Tom," Clara said quietly. "I was in it too. We both decided that Mark should know. Because it's the right thing, Laura. You made a choice, and—" "Don't you dare," Laura interrupted, her voice full of rage. "Don't you dare say it's my choice. It was a mistake, Clara. One night, one stupid moment. And now my life is falling apart, and you stand here, protecting Tom like he's a saint." Clara covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back her sobs. She wanted to scream, to tell Laura how much it hurt her, how afraid she was of losing her sister. But the words did not come. "Laura, please," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "I didn't want this to happen. I love you. You are my sister. Let's talk. Let's try." "No," Laura snapped. "I don't want to hear you. And I don't want to see either you or Tom. Both of you. You betrayed me. Don't call me. Don't write. I don't want you in my life." Clara felt her world crumble. She opened her mouth to object, but Laura hung up. The line went dead, and the kitchen fell silent. Clara stared at the phone, her tears dripping onto the table. She felt like she had lost a part of herself. Laura was her little sister, her friend, her family. And now she left, taking with her everything that connected them. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, her shoulders shaking. She remembered how she and Laura would build a hut out of blankets as children, how they would share secrets, how Laura would hug her at her wedding, whispering, "You will always be my best friend." These memories cut her like a knife because now they seemed so far away. She didn't know how long she sat there, crying in silence. Her thoughts rushed between Laura and Tom. She was angry at Tom for calling Mark, but she also knew that he did it on principle. And she herself agreed with this decision, although now it was tearing her heart apart. She felt crushed, caught between her love for her sister and her duty to the truth. The door opened and Tom walked in, his face tired after a long day. He stopped when he saw Clara, her tear-stained face and hunched shoulders. "Clara," he said, his voice filled with worry. He walked up to her, lowering his bag to the floor. "What's happened?" Clara looked up, her eyes full of pain. "Laura called," she said, her voice hoarse. "She knows what you told Mark. She hates us, Tom. She told us not to appear in her life." Tom froze, his face turning pale. He sat down next to her. His hands lay limp on the table. Did she say that?" he asked, his voice quiet. Clara nodded, her tears flowing again. "She was screaming," she said. "She said you ruined her life. That I betrayed her. She doesn't want to see us. Never." Tom clenched his fists, his face a mixture of guilt and determination. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said. "Is it true? But I couldn't remain silent. Mark deserved to know. Clara looked at him, her eyes full of pain. "What does Laura deserve?" she said. "What do I deserve? I lost my sister, Tom, and I don't know how to fix it." Tom reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her shoulders trembling. "I don't know what to say," he said, his voice full of pain. "But I did what I thought was right. And you agreed too." Clara shook her head, her tears dripping onto the table. "I agreed," she said, "and now I regret it, because it cost me my sister." She stood up. Her movements were sharp and left the kitchen, leaving Tom alone. He looked after her, feeling his heart squeezing. He knew that the truth had a price, but he did not expect it to be so high. A week had passed since Laura had cut ties with Clara, and the Reynolds house was still filled with tension. Clara walked like a shadow, her smile disappeared. Her eyes were red from the tears that she hid from Tom. She hardly spoke, answering in monosyllables, and Tom felt a wall growing between them. Their first session with a therapist was scheduled for tomorrow, and he hoped it would help, but so far every day seemed like a challenge. Tom blamed himself for Clara's pain, but he couldn't back down from what he thought was right. His call to Mark changed everything, and now he was waiting for the consequences, not knowing what they would be. On Friday afternoon, Mark wrote to Tom, suggesting they meet at a cafe nearby. Tom agreed immediately, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. He didn't know what to expect: anger, accusations, or silence. But he knew he had to meet Mark face to face to understand the role he played in his life. The Bean and Brew Cafe was cozy, with wooden tables and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Tom arrived first, ordered black coffee, and sat by the window, looking at the passers-by. His fingers nervously tapped his mug when he saw Mark enter the cafe. Mark looked different than usual. His shoulders were slumped, his face was drawn, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His dark hair was disheveled and his shirt was slightly wrinkled, which was unusual for a neat accountant. "Tom," Mark said, holding out his hand. His voice was quiet but warm. "Thank you for coming." Tom shook his hand, feeling his stomach clench. "Of course," he said, pointing to the chair opposite. "How are you?" Mark sat up, his movements slow, as if he was conserving his strength. He ordered an espresso from the waitress, who came up and looked at Tom, his eyes full of fatigue but not anger. "Honestly," Mark said, his lips twitching into a faint smile, "badly. But I'm glad you called. Thanks for this." Tom blinked, his eyebrows raised. He expected anything but gratitude. "Thank you?" he asked, his voice full of surprise. "Mark, I thought you would be angry. I got into your life." Mark shook his head, his fingers fiddling with the edge of the napkin. "I'm not angry," he said. "Maybe it was, for the first couple of hours. But then, I realized that you gave me a chance to find out the truth. It hurts, Tom. It hurts a lot. But I wouldn't want to live a lie." Tom nodded, his face serious. He looked at Mark, trying to understand how he was holding up after such a blow. "How did it go?" he asked carefully. "When did you talk to Laura?" Mark sighed, his gaze falling on the table. The waitress brought the espresso, but he didn't touch it. "It's hard," he said. "I came home after your call and asked her directly. At first she tried to deny it, but then she burst into tears and told everything. About the alumni meeting, about this guy. She said it was a mistake, that she was drunk. But—" His voice trembled, and he fell silent, pursing his lips. Tom leaned a little closer, his voice soft. "But what?" he asked. Mark looked up, his eyes full of pain. "But I can't forget it," he said. "I look at her, and all I see is her with someone else. I tried, Tom. I tried to understand, to forgive. But I can't. Every time she's around, I feel empty." Tom felt his throat tighten. He knew the truth would be painful, but seeing Mark so calm and broken at the same time was harder than he expected. "I'm sorry, Mark," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't want it to happen like this. I just thought you should know." Mark nodded, his fingers finally taking the cup, but he only turned it over in his hands. "I know," he said, "and I'm grateful. Is it true? If you hadn't called, I would have continued to live without knowing. And then maybe I would have found out later, and it would have been even worse. You did the right thing." Tom pursed his lips, his eyes full of guilt. He didn't feel like a hero. He had seen Clara's pain, heard Laura's rage, and now he was looking at Mark, whose life was falling apart because of his decision. "What are you going to do?" Tom asked, his voice quiet. Mark looked out the window, his face motionless. "I'm filing for divorce," he said. "I've already talked to a lawyer. I don't see any other way. I can't be with her after this. Rule 1. I can't trust her, Tom. It hurts too much." Mark spoke slowly. His voice was full of pain. "I tried to forgive, but every time I see her with someone else. I can't live like this." Tom nodded, his face serious. "I understand," he said. It's hard. If you need anything, I'm here. Clara and we are ready to help." Mark smiled faintly, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you, Tom," he said. "This means a lot. I can handle it. It just takes time." They fell silent, finishing their coffee. Tom felt the weight of his choice like a weight on his shoulders. He did what he thought was right, but the price was high. Mark's pain, Laura's rage, Clara's tears. He looked at Mark, who tried to hold on, and wondered if the truth was worth the pain. "You acted honestly," Mark said, standing up and extending his hand. "Not many people would do that. I appreciate it." Tom shook his hand, his face tense. "Take care of yourself, Mark," he said. "Call me if anything happens." Mark nodded and left, his figure disappearing into the crowd on the street. Tom remained sitting, looking at the empty cup. It had been 2 weeks since Tom had met Mark at the cafe, and the Reynolds house still seemed a place of wary silence. Clara and Tom tried to be closer, but their conversations were short, full of understatement. Clara avoided mentioning Laura, but her absence was felt in every glance, in every silent breath. Tom, in turn, struggled with a feeling of guilt that grew every day for Clara's pain, for Laura and Mark's divorce, for the fact that his decision to tell the truth changed the lives of everyone around him. Their first session with a couples therapist was scheduled for Wednesday morning, and they both looked forward to it with hope and fear. Dr. Linda Harris's office was in downtown Portland, in a small building overlooking a park. The office was cozy, a soft sofa, several pillows, a table with a box of tissues, and a couple of potted plants. Linda, a woman in her 50s with a warm smile and attentive eyes, met them at the door. Her calmness immediately calmed Clara a little, who was nervously fiddling with the strap of her bag. "Tom, Clara, welcome," Linda said, pointing to the sofa. "Sit down, make yourself comfortable. Today, we'll just start talking. No pressure." Tom and Clara sat down, leaving a small distance between them. Clara crossed her arms, her gaze glued to the carpet. Tom sat up straight, his fingers tapping his knee. Linda sat down in the chair opposite, holding the notebook but not opening it. "So," Linda began, her voice soft but confident, "tell me why you are here. What brings you to me?" Clara looked at Tom, waiting for him to start. He swallowed, his face tense. We've had a rough month," he said, his voice hoarse. "It all started with one thing that I found. Condom wrapper in our dryer. We don't use them, so it caused a fight." Linda nodded, her face neutral but attentive. "It must have been a shock," she said. "What happened next?" Clara took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the edge of her sweater. "We found out it belonged to my sister Laura," she said, her voice shaking. She cheated on her husband, Mark. We gave her time to tell him herself, but she couldn't. And Tom, he called Mark and told him everything." Tom nodded, his gaze falling to the floor. "I thought it was right," he said. "Mark deserved to know. But now, Laura hates us. She broke off contact with Clara, and Mark filed for divorce. I feel like it's all because of me." Linda looked at him, her eyes full of sympathy. "This is a great responsibility that you have taken on, Tom," she said. "Tell me how you feel about this." Tom clenched his fists and his face turned red. "I feel guilty," he said. "Clara lost her sister. Mark lost his marriage. And I don't know if I did the right thing. I thought the truth was the only way. But now I see how it hurts everyone, especially Clara. Clara looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. I don't blame you, Tom, she said quietly. Not really. But Laura was my family. She doesn't talk to me. I call, right, and she just ignores. I feel like I've lost her forever. Linda nodded, her voice soft but firm. Clara, losing contact with your sister is a huge pain, she said. Tell me how this affects you, and for your marriage. Clara wiped away a tear, her voice trembling. I, I feel empty, she said. Laura was always there, even when we quarreled. And now she's gone, and I'm angry at her, at Tom, at myself. But I also know that our marriage, it's more important. I don't want to lose Tom, but I don't know how to move on when everything hurts so much. Tom looked at her, his face full of pain and tenderness. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, and this small gesture was like an anchor in a storm. I don't want to lose you either, Clar, he said, his voice hoarse. I hate that you suffer because of this, and I hate that I feel guilty for what I did. Linda looked at them. Her smile was subtle but warm. You are both in great pain, she said, and you both want to save your marriage. This is a good sign. Let's try to figure out what you can do to move forward. Tom, let's start with you. How do you deal with guilt? Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping. I, I don't know, he said. I keep thinking that I could have waited, given Laura more time. Maybe then Clara wouldn't have lost her sister. But then I remember Mark, how he thanked me for the truth, and I don't know what would be better. Linda nodded, her voice calm. Tom, you made a choice based on your values, she said. You chose honesty, but you can't control how others react to the truth. Laura made her choice when she cheated on Mark. It's not your responsibility. You may feel guilty, but it is important to understand that you did not force her to act this way. Tom looked at her, his eyes full of doubt. But I made it all happen, he said. If I hadn't called Mark, then Mark would be living a lie, Linda interrupted softly, and Laura would continue to carry this secret. You can't know what would be better. You did what you thought was right. Your job now is to accept it and work on how it affects your marriage. Tom nodded, his face tense, but there was a spark of relief in his eyes. Clara squeezed his hand a little tighter, her voice quiet. I know you wanted to be honest, she said, and I understand why you did it. But I still miss Laura, and I'm afraid I'll never be able to get her back. Linda looked at Clara, her gaze full of sympathy. Clara, your grief is real, she said. You have lost contact with your sister, and this is a huge loss. But you can't force Laura to come back. You can only work on yourself and your marriage. What do you want for yourself and Tom? Clara looked at Tom. Her tears flowed again, but she smiled, weakly but sincerely. I want us to be close, she said, just like before. I want us to talk, to trust each other. I don't want this rapper to destroy us. Tom nodded, his eyes sparkling. I want it too, he said, and I'm ready to work on it. For our sake. Linda smiled, her voice was warm. This is a great start, she said. You both want the same thing. Now we need to learn to speak openly, share fears and expectations. It won't be easy, but you've already taken the first step by coming here. The session continued for another half hour. They talked about their fears, about how routine had consumed their intimacy, about how Laura and Mark's pain had affected them. Clara admitted that she feels guilty for not protecting her sister, and Tom shared how he fears his decision has changed their family forever. Linda listened, asked questions, helped them see each other not as adversaries, but as partners who experience pain together. When they left the office, Clara took Tom's hand. Her fingers were warm. They walked to the car in silence, but this silence was different, not heavy, but full of hope. Clara was still grieving for Laura, but knew that her marriage to Tom was something she wanted to fight for. Tom felt some of his guilt lift thanks to Linda's words, but he knew there was still a lot of work ahead. We can handle it, right? Clara asked, stopping at the car. Her voice was quiet, but there was a sense of determination in it. Tom looked at her, his face softening. "Yes," he said, "together." They got into the car, their hands still clasped. It's been a year since that Saturday morning when a condom wrapper found in the dryer turned the lives of Tom and Clara Reynolds upside down. Their home in the Portland suburbs still bore traces of that storm. Photographs of Laura disappeared from the shelves, and conversations about her became rare and cautious. But laughter appeared in the house again, the warm light of evening lamps, and the usual comfort of joint dinners. Therapy with Dr. Linda Harris became their lifeline, helping them sort through their fears, resentments, and expectations. Tom and Clara learned to talk to each other truly, without innuendo, and their marriage, although frayed, became stronger than ever. Friday evening was warm, with the faint scent of magnolia blossoms wafting through the open window. Clara sat at the kitchen table, leafing through a travel brochure. Her brown hair was pulled back into a loose bun, and there was a slight smile on her face rare in recent months, but now more and more frequent. Tom stood at the stove, stirring spaghetti sauce, humming something under his breath. The radio was playing an old Frank Sinatra tune, and the atmosphere was almost festive. "So," Clara said, tapping her pencil on the brochure, "I think Italy. Tuscany, maybe, vineyards, small towns. Sounds like the perfect way to celebrate the 21st anniversary." Tom turned, his eyebrows raised, but his eyes flashed with enthusiasm. "Italy?" he said, wiping his hands on a towel. "This is serious, Clar. I thought you'd choose something like camping in Oregon." Clara laughed. Her laughter was light, almost like when she was young. "Camping?" she said, mock rolling her eyes. "Tom, we are no longer those 20-year-olds who slept in a tent in the rain. I want wine, cheese, and a warm bed." Tom walked up to the table, his smile warm. He sat down next to her, looking at the brochure. "Okay, I give up," he said. "Tuscany sounds good, but I choose restaurants. No tourist traps with over-salted pasta." Clara nodded, her hand covering his. "We agreed," she said, "but I chose a hotel. None of your economy options overlook the parking lot." They both laughed, and this moment their easy conversation, their closeness was like proof that they had survived the storm. Therapy taught them not only to talk about pain, but also to find joy in small things, in joint plans, in jokes, in silence, which was no longer heavy. But even at such moments, Clara felt a pang of sadness. She didn't say it out loud, but Laura's absence was like an empty seat at the table. Clara learned from their mother that Laura had moved to San Diego, California, where she took a new job in a design studio. She started a new life, but did not take a single step towards reconciliation. Clara wrote to her, sent messages on birthdays and holidays, but there were no answers. Laura blamed Tom for her divorce from Mark, for the fact that her secret became obvious, and this resentment seemed to extend to Clara. "Are you okay?" Tom asked, noticing how her smile dimmed. His voice was soft, full of concern. Clara nodded, but her eyes betrayed her. "Yes," she said, her voice quieter. "I was just thinking about Laura. Mom called yesterday. She said Laura was doing well in San Diego, but she doesn't want to talk to me." Tom squeezed her hand, his face becoming serious. "I'm sorry, Clar," he said. "I know how hard it is for you. If I could change something." "No need," Clara interrupted. Her voice was firm but warm. "We talked about this with Linda. You did what you thought was right. Laura, she made her own choice. I just miss her." Tom nodded, his eyes full of guilt but also understanding. Therapy helped him accept that he was not responsible for Laura's actions, but Clara's pain still affected him. "Maybe she'll change her mind," he said. "Give her time. You know Laura, she's stubborn, but not forever." Clara smiled weakly, her fingers squeezing his hand. "Maybe," she said. "But even if not, we have us, and this is more important." Tom looked at her, his heart sank with love. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, his lips lingering for a second. "We can handle it," he said, as always. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Clara frowned, glancing at her watch. It was almost 7 in the evening. "Who is this?" she asked, standing up. Tom shrugged, heading towards the door. "Maybe the neighbor is getting some salt," he said with a slight grin. He opened the door and saw Mark standing on the porch. Mark looked better than in the cafe a month ago. His face was less drawn, his shirt was neatly ironed, but there was still a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Mark," Tom said, his voice full of surprise. "Hello. Come in." Mark smiled. His smile was weak but sincere. "I hope I didn't disturb you," he said as he entered. "I was nearby. I thought I'd pop in." Clara came out of the kitchen, her face lighting up at the sight of Mark. "Mark," she said, her voice was warm. "It's great to see you. Do you want dinner? We have spaghetti." Mark shook his head, his hands going into his pockets. "Thank you, but I won't be long," he said. "Just wanted to chat. With Tom, mostly." Tom nodded, pointing towards the living room. "Let's go sit down," he said. "Clara, are you with us?" Clara shook her head, her smile soft. "I'll finish dinner," she said. "Talk." She returned to the kitchen, leaving the men alone. Tom and Mark sat in the living room, Mark on the sofa, Tom in the chair. The silence was awkward, but not hostile. "How are you?" Tom asked, his voice cautious. "I mean, after everything." Mark sighed, his fingers fiddling with the hem of his sleeve. "Better," he said. "The divorce is almost completed. Laura and I. We signed the papers last week. She went to California. I stayed in Seattle." Tom nodded, his face serious. "I'm sorry this happened," he said. "Is it true?" Mark looked at him, his eyes full of gratitude. "No need," he said. "You did me a favor, Tom. I know it sounds weird, but I'm glad I found out. It hurt, but now I can move on. I couldn't live without knowing." Tom pursed his lips, his guilt easing a little, but not disappearing. "I was afraid that you would hate me," he admitted. "For getting in." Mark smiled faintly, his voice warm. "Hate?" he said. "No, Tom. You were honest. This is rare, and I appreciate you being there. These meetings are conversations. They help." Tom nodded, his face softening. Their meetings with Mark, a couple of beers in a bar, an occasional coffee in a cafe became an unexpected friendship. Mark found comfort in them, and Tom found a way to atone for his guilt. "If you need to chat, I'm always here," Tom said. "Seriously." Mark nodded, his eyes sparkling. "Thank you," he said. "Maybe next week. I'll be in town." "Agreed," Tom said, his smile sincere. Mark left after half an hour, leaving Tom with a feeling of relief. He returned to the kitchen, where Clara was setting the table. She looked at him, her eyebrows raised. "Everything is fine?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Tom nodded, hugging her from behind. His chin rested on her shoulder. "Yes," he said. "Mark is holding on, and I think we do too." Clara turned, her arms wrapped around his waist. "We're holding on," she said, her voice firm, "and we will go to Italy, and we will be happy." Tom smiled, his lips touched hers. "I promise," he said. "Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.